So many of you are fascinated by stories about the royal family. And some of you may have seen Andrew on Attwood Unleashed talking about Mountbatten. So today we are going to do a much longer version of that story. And we are also going to touch on some of the other work from Andrew's. Do you pronounce it oeuvre?
Yes, oeuvre.
Oeuvre.
I like to call it oeuvre.
Including The Traitor King. We can only go so far with that one, though. And you know who that is. Guy Burgess. So I was just reading a little bit about what you wrote about him. That seems fascinating. James, you'd heard of him, hadn't you? Guy Burgess? The Spy. Yeah.
Cambridge Spies, yep.
Yeah. And all right, so before we get into Dickie then, who is Dr. Andrew Lownie?
Well, most of my career has been as a literary agent. That's what the day job is. And I represent about 200 authors. I specialize in history and biography. But I've done all sorts of books, lots of some celebrity memoir, travel, food, wine, some fiction. So that's the day job. And then beside that, I try and write books. So I started off, the first book came out in 1992, a book called North American Spies. Then I did Literary Guide to Edinburgh, which is where I'd sort of grown up. Then I did the book on John Buchan, who was the author of the 39 Steps in 1995. And then I kind of slowed down. I had a family and a pretty busy job. And so nothing much happened until Guy Burgess in 2015. But I've been speeding up. So Dickie was 2019. And now I've got The Traitor King coming out to 2021.
Literary agent representing 200 authors. That must be quite a have its challenges.
Yes, no, it's busy. It is busy, and particularly with emails, we get more and more submissions. In the old days, they had to at least write a letter. Now they just press a button.
Yeah.
So, and it's much, much quicker. You know, people are making decisions. There are many more agents. It's harder in some ways to get published because the publishers need higher thresholds, but easier because, of course, people can self-publish. So it's changing, and of course, ebooks and Amazon have revolutionized the market.
So, what's the longest in terms of years you've represented somebody?
I have people I represented since I started in 1985.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Good grief.
You know, most of my authors are younger than me now, but I've got a couple. I've got a couple in their 90s. And every time there's a contract, the editors say, well, if they die, we want our money back. And they've seen out several editors already.
Are you still taking new authors, or are you done?
No, I'm always looking for new authors. We get about 100 submissions a day.
100 a day?
And I'll take on maybe 12 a year.
Wow. And that's got to be from that genre of historical, though.
Tends to be now. I mean, I will take other things if it's interesting or different.
Yeah.
I've just sold the memoirs of a traffic cop.
A trafficked cop. A traffic cop.
Traffic cop.
Called
Hot Pursuit. And then another book, The Memoirs of a Prison Art Tutor. So, yeah, it varies. I like doing memoir as well. I like people's stories.
They sound like good guests for this podcast if you want to put
them
our way.
Look at the website. You take your pick. Yeah. No, there's some very interesting people. I mean, I've got one woman you'll love who was brought up by monkeys in the Colombian jungle. She was abandoned as a child, age 6, and brought up by these capuchin monkeys. And no one believed her. We did a National Geographic sort of documentary on her. She was a New York Times bestseller, sold in about 20 countries. But we tested her by taking her to Monkey World, and she went and talked to the monkeys. She's in her 50s now. She just climbs trees like an animal.
How long was she in them with the monkeys?
Several years.
Let us know in the comments if you want the monkey lady on the podcast. I think I know the answer.
Yeah, she's great.
And what's her name?
She's called Marina Chapman.
Marina Chapman.
Yeah, the girl with no name. It's called.
Has she done anything like this before?
No. She's got a very good ghostwriter. She's not brilliant at speaking, so maybe the ghostwriter would be better. But I've got another one it's a book called Today I'm Alice. She's a woman with multiple personalities. So she's a woman now in her 50s, but she'll go into a meeting, and then one minute she's like a 3-year-old girl, next minute she's like an 18-year-old sort of thug.
Imagine interviewing someone and they're going through the personalities.
Yeah. It's kind of, well, I've had publishers who got so freaked out they didn't buy the book.
Really?
Because she had one of these sessions.
So it's like a fast rotation, is it? Into
Yeah. She just moves into between these personalities.
So when you meet her, does she go through her personalities?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You just need to learn to talk to her in the personality she's in. Take it seriously. I always keep a few children's toys in the office for that
reason. What a life! All right, so I said Dickie earlier. Some people may not have registered who that is. Can you explain to us who was Dickie and Edwina Mountbatten?
Yeah.
And how you came to have an interest in that?
Well, the book arose out of the Guy Burgess book. The Dickie Mountbatten had been at the same school and at Dartmouth just after Guy Burgess. Sorry, just before. And I'd read the biography. There's not an official book that was done, which is deadly boring. And I thought, here's a fascinating character. And no one has done him and his wife together. And it was a very unusual marriage, one filled with infidelities, but actually a very loving marriage. And Dickie Mountbatten is Prince Philip's uncle. He was the last godchild of Queen Victoria, her great-grandson. And so he's a member of the royal family. His aunt was married to Tsar Nicholas I. He was brought up with the Russian royal family. And he went into the Navy, followed his father, who was the first Sea Lord, into the Navy. And he eventually became First Sea Lord himself, but he was the last Viceroy of India. He was the Supreme Allied Commander in Southeast Asia during the war. He was a great socialite and a great mentor to Prince Charles, known as his honorary grandfather. A great mentor in many ways to the Queen, because she came to the throne clearly as a very young woman. Very friendly with King George VI. He was the man who actually, in some ways, plotted the marriage of Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip. He brought them together. He was a great sort of dynasty maker. And his best man when he got married was the Duke of Windsor, which is how I got on to King Edward VIII. And then Edwina was the richest heiress in the world when they married in 1922. Her grandfather, a man called Casson, was a great banker.
Richest heiress in the world.
So, yeah. And she was a very glamorous figure, beautiful, very beautiful woman, lots of lovers after they got married. And then it's a sort of book of two halves, because she sort of finds her purpose in the Second World War. She takes up charitable work, particularly for Save the Children, and spends the rest of her life going out and doing good works. So in some ways, as we get to know Dickie, we become to like him perhaps a bit less. And as we get to know her, we get to like her a bit more.
How did they meet?
They met in Cowes, as one does, during the Cowes weekend. And she found him a very exotic figure. There's a picture in the book of him climbing the mast, no safety net. He used to water ski to between ships in his dinner jacket with his shoes around his neck. He was a character, and she was used to these rather boring aristocrats. And here was this extraordinary, vibrant character.
What's a skiing with his... I never knew that. Good grief. So how come she inherited all this wealth? Where did that come from?
Well, it came from this grandfather who was a banker, a man called Casson. And then, in fact, her mother died when she was very young. She had a rather tragic upbringing where she was sent off to school when she was young. She had a rather nasty stepmother. And that, in some ways, I think, is why she was always looking for this attention from men later. And she always found it much easier, a bit like Princess Diana, to bond with children than she did with adults. So, but when she married Dickie, she came into this inheritance, or part of it. And there was this great worry that he was really just looking out for her money. And they got engaged on Valentine's Day. She followed him out. He was actually the ADC to the Prince of Wales, future King Edward VIII, going around India in 1922 and staying with the Viceroy. And she went and stayed there. That's where they got engaged. But the Viceroy's wife was very worried about Dickie. She thought he was a bit of a didn't trust him. And she said to him, to Edwina's father, I hope, she knows what she's doing. And she's, why doesn't she marry someone with better prospects? Well, of course, Dickie ended up doing brilliantly. But it was always a very strange marriage, because he was almost autistic. He was a great controller of things. When they went on honeymoon, he had to basically plot which road they would take and where they would stay. Whereas she was a free spirit. She wanted to get away from all that and just have time. But they had this really odd honeymoon. There were three of them. They drove out by car. They went and visited his relations to start with, which is not a good start to a honeymoon. And they had a chauffeur, but Dickie loved driving so much that the chauffeur sat in the back and the two of them sat in the front.
Did you say he was came from the Russian royal family?
Yeah, well, I mean, his aunt had married Tsar Nicholas I. In fact, his first sort of, I would say girlfriend, but the first girl he sort of fell in love with was one of the daughters of the Tsar, and he used to go and have holidays with them. I mean, he was very much part of the Hesse family, German Hesse family. So, of course, he was a Battenberg. And what happened during the First World War was, of course, everyone had to change their names, all the Germans. So they were going to call them Oldcastle. They thought it sounded a bit like a brewery. So they changed the name to Mountbatten. So
he was a Hesse?
Yes, he was a Prince of Hesse.
Prince of Hesse? So how was it back then? Did the royals just interbreed within their own social structure?
They're all interrelated with the European royal families. So his sister, one sister married the King of Greece, or rather Prince Andrew of Greece, Alice. Another sister, Louise, married the King of Sweden. So they carried on doing it, really. And he was a great matchmaker. So he, as I say, match-made Prince Philip with the Queen. That famous meeting at Dartmouth in 1939, he was the one who basically encouraged King George to stop off there. He was the one who made Prince Philip the person showing around. And he encouraged that relationship with the father. I mean, there's a lot of correspondence on that, but he also invited the two of them together. And then he did the same with Prince Charles. He tried to get Prince Charles to marry his granddaughter Amanda. So he helped encourage the marriage of Princess Michael and Prince Michael. So he was a great sort of matchmaker. He's a bit of a fixer. He loved that. And he had this great belief that having given his name to Philip, Philip took his name Mountbatten, he would create this dynasty of Mountbattens. And of course, there was this great debate. Could Philip, would the Queen become a Mountbatten, or would she stay as a Windsor? And of course, there was that great battle, and the rule was that the descendants would be Windsors, but the others would be called Mountbatten Windsor, which is what happens now.
So, was it to kind of prevent wars that they had all these different countries sending their daughters to marry in the different countries? Was that the theory behind it?
Well, it was, up to certainly up to the First World War. Yes, there were alliances there. But clearly after that, I think it's just the people they met. And I think the Mountbatten family were quite ambitious, and those were, I suppose, good marriages. Poor old Princess Alice. I mean, there's been a bit of publicity about her recently. She eventually became a had but she was deaf. She had to sight read in different languages, and she had psychiatric problems and was actually in an asylum, a sanatorium, for much of Prince Philip's youth. So he was rather abandoned, and his father then went off with his mistress to Monte Carlo.
So if you were a royal daughter back then, were you told you're going to marry this person, or was there a courtship ritual? Did you have any choice in the matter?
Well, I think a lot of the marriages were encouraged or arranged. And, if we think, for example, of Queen Mary, Princess Mary of Teck, she was due to marry King George V's older brother, and he died, and therefore she just passed down to the next one. So, I think they just they accepted that was what happened, which is why they, of course, had all these lovers. But the marriage, I think, between Dickie and Edwina was a love match. The problem was that he was away serving in the Navy. She got lonely. She wanted attention, so she began to have these affairs. I found 17 lovers. But her daughter said that there were some I'd missed. So the hunt goes on for the missing lovers of Edwina. Where
did she source these gentlemen from?
Just people she met socially. So one was a man called Hugh Sefton, who was regarded as the best-looking man in Britain, who was an army officer. A lot of them were in the polo set, because Mountbatten was a very keen polo player and had a polo team. So she met them at the polo. She had a thing for Americans. She liked very rich people. Didn't tend to fall in love with poor people. She liked black men. She had an affair with Paul Robeson, the actor, and Leslie Hutchinson, the singer. Of course, a long affair with Nehru, the Indian leader. So, and they both liked sort of brown-skinned people. So he had He tended to have affairs with young boys from Sri Lanka and Ceylon.
Dickie did.
Yeah, and with women as well.
Good grief, we're gonna get
So you can see a great subject. Yeah. Well, it's like sort of everyday life in Surrey, isn't it?
Maybe Westminster. So, was it understood then that while he's away, that she was allowed to do these things?
Well,
he was
he
allowed to do
didn't.
what he wanted to do. Was it like an open relationship?
Well, it became an open relationship. They didn't really. I mean, he was very upset when he discovered that she was having these affairs.
How did he discover that?
He was told it by the Prince of Wales, and he was terribly upset. He thought of getting divorced, and she literally one evening came to him. We're in the middle of the night. They had separate bedrooms, and she came to him, and they chatted about it. And the next morning, they decided that they would go there, have their open marriage, but as long as she didn't scare the horses. So as long as the royal family weren't affected, and it didn't jeopardize his naval career. So she had to be discreet. And so she did have her affairs. And then eventually he began to have affairs himself. But she didn't like him having affairs. She was very jealous, which was a bit unfair. So when she brought them home, she would be at the sort of keyhole looking through, seeing what was going on. And there were a couple of occasions where he came on leave expecting to meet the girlfriend, and Edwina would befriend them and then take them off somewhere on holiday, and he'd come back and find they'd gone.
Wow. So what led him then? Actually, I've got a question on what you just said. Containing this information back then was easy, was it? Because there was no internet or anything to keep it secret, was that?
Yes, it was very discreet. I mean, and to be honest, those circles are still very discreet. I found it very difficult to get information. A lot of stuff was is not told. I mean, the great thing is this is why I'm very keen to get access to their diaries and letters, which are closed at the moment, because that would clearly reveal a lot more. But they did write letters to people, and some of those letters are in collections elsewhere. But yeah, very difficult. And of course, the press was very deferential, so this stuff wasn't covered, and a lot of the stuff is suppressed. So, for example, she was quoted in several divorce cases, but when you go and look at the divorce papers in the archives, you find that those cases are missing.
Wow. So
there's been a bit of a mop-up operation. And certainly, for example, she was sued several times by the partners of the people she was having affairs with, but that was sort of kept quiet. There were one of the people who did that for her was Lord Beaverbrook. But there was a famous case in 1932 where a paper reported her affair with a black man, and she sued. She was told by the royal family, "Look, you need to address this. People are going to believe it," and it was true. But she sued them for libel, and some deal was done. So she didn't get damages, but there was an apology from the newspaper. It was all done very quietly. 9 a.m, the press were kept out. But she then went into exile, in effect, and she spent the 1930s traveling with one or two of her different boyfriends around the world. So she would ride across South America, camp in the desert in the Middle East. She was one of the first people to travel through the Southeast Asia, to go down the Great China Road. She was an extraordinary adventurer as well.
Do you think in this internet era then that the royal family can maintain such secrecy?
Well, I think there are lots of affairs within the royal family, and they don't get covered, or they're rumors. So yeah, I think they can. I mean, there are, for example, exemptions with documents that interview with the royal family. Section 37 means they can't be. You can't talk about it. There is data protection now, even for public figures. So yeah, stuff is certainly kept quiet. And of course, the circles that they have their affairs and do things is very tight, and people don't betray those confidences. So yeah, lots of stuff goes on that we don't know about.
Are there any affairs that are rumours of affairs that you've heard of that you can say?
Well, I better not say. I'll be in trouble. But certainly Mountbatten used to lend his country house, Broadlands, to members of the family to bring girlfriends down.
Wow.
So certainly, I mean, Charles, before he's married, so he's perfectly entitled, his girlfriends would take girlfriends down there to basically have a nice weekend away from the paparazzi and get to know them.
And we're going to get to his stuff with Charles in a minute then. So, when did evidence surface of Dickie's P? I hope you're enjoying the podcast. It's a word from my sponsor, Shopify. When I started this podcast, there were a lot of things I had to figure out on my own. Algorithms, guest booking, marketing. I was a bit naive about what was involved, and as you get deeper into it, it starts to overwhelm your life. Finding the right tool that not only helps you out, but simplifies everything can be such a game changer. For millions of businesses, that tool is Shopify. Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world, from household names like Mattel and Gymshark to brands just getting started, such as my co-host Ron's Pokemon business. Get started with your own design studio of hundreds of ready-to-use templates. Shopify helps you build a beautiful online store to match your brand style. Accelerate your content creation. Shopify is packed with helpful AI tools that write product descriptions, page headlines, and even enhance your product photography. Get the word out like you have a marketing team behind you. Easily create email and social media campaigns wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling. And best yet, Shopify is your commerce expert with world-class expertise in everything from managing inventory to international shipping to processing returns and beyond. If you're ready to sell, you're ready for Shopify. Turn your big business idea into with Shopify on your side. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.co.uk/Shaun, SHAUN. Go to shopify.co.uk/Shaun, shopify.co.uk/Shaun. Link in the description if you're watching on YouTube. Thanks for supporting our sponsor. Back to the podcast.
Well, I don't know when other people knew. I discovered it in the course of my research because I found an FBI file that had been opened on him during the war when he became Supreme Allied Commander. And someone had basically been interviewed about something else and then just said, but by the way, you know the new Supreme Allied Commander likes boys. So they reported that. They kept the files open. And so files were opened on him and also on her because of her quite left-wing communist views right through the 40s and 50s. Now, you can't always trust FBI files because all they do is record what people tell them. But there were so many different people, quite reputable people, wives of, for example, the Viceroy of India was one, giving this information, all pretty consistent. So that's where it came. There were lots of rumors. I mean, over the last 30 years, Private Eye and people have run stories, but without any proof. But what I managed to do was to track down two boys, now in their late 50s, who were by Mountbatten in 1977 as 16-year-olds.
Wow.
And they were prepared to talk to me, and we had, for legal reasons, to disguise their identity. But the good news is they are both about, or certainly one, and I hope the other, are about to be on a television program where they'll talk about this.
Wow.
So I think that will, open things up. But, a lot of the files and all that have been closed. I requested the car logs for August 77 when they were for Classieborn, which is the house in the west of Ireland that he had where this all happened. And the Garda have refused to release those logs, so they admit they have them. They say it's part of the murder inquiries, but the murder did only happen 2 years later. So that's slightly odd. But, time and time again, you find the files have been weeded. A lot of the very strict, rather restricted circumferences to some of these tribunals, and of course these people are very damaged. They've tried to discredit them with of course the famous Nick, who turned out to be a fake, and so as a result of Nick, a lot of people wouldn't believe the genuine ones. So but I think they're very convincing. I mean, I clearly put my reputation on the line, but the facts they gave me all added up. There were things that they knew they couldn't have known unless they'd actually been to Classieborn and indeed knew some of the characters who, for example, worked there.
Could you expand on those stories then?
Well, I didn't do much because I it is quite sensational, and I didn't want to press them too much. But there are quotes in the book about they received when, and what happened. I think one of them, Shaun, was taken there a couple of times, and Mal was taken, I think, 4 times. But they were part of a bigger ring, a VIP abuse ring operating in the country houses of Ireland. So
what?
Yeah, no, it's an extraordinary story which has been just completely suppressed.
So you're saying that back in, this is the 1970s, was it?
This was 70s.
There was a big VIP ring operating in Ireland.
Yeah.
Does this, because I've heard about Kincora?
Well, it's linked into Kincora. One of the boys wasn't in Kincora. This was a children's home in Belfast. And of course, there was very little supervision. There were, of course, no parents showing any interest in them. And these children were basically farmed out to these weekends or to these men by the staff there, who were themselves abused. So it's a scandal. And the Kincora thing, the files still remain closed. The people try very hard to get the stories, but a lot of the boys committed suicide. So the boy I interviewed, Shaun, is one of the few survivors, and he's a very, as I say, convincing interviewee. He's got highly intelligent, very good memory, very consistent, and he's now he's got a court case going through, and I hope that will. It's been delayed because of COVID, but I hope that will lead to some sort of justice for him.
Where's Shaun based?
Shaun lives in the States now.
Does he? Okay. Oh, I may have had a communication with him, actually, someone in the States, Kincora.
Yeah, you may have well done.
Yeah. So my question was going to be that, how did he access these boys? But you're saying that they were supplied to him by this ring.
Yeah.
So he would have known then that he, I'm getting these through a ring. Would he have known?
Oh yes, they all. I mean, provide boys for each other. They pass them around. There was rumors that they came from a school called Portora, which was a sort of like the Eton of Northern Ireland. But some of these people, they would invite. Some of it was not was sort of above board. They would just invite lots of young men to parties, and what happened was up to the people who were there. But I think the problem with Kincora were these vulnerable children who were had no choice in the matter.
Definitely. Now, I can understand to an extent your friends and the people you work with covering up you're having an affair with somebody. But if you're a minor, I mean, how would he insulate himself from people trying to stop him from doing that or exposing it? Because it's a different level.
Well, it was a very tight ring. I mean, it was sort of mutually assured destruction if anything happened. So, but there was extraordinary discretion. I mean, he was bisexual. He had affairs all through his life with men. It was, after all, criminal offence until the 1960s. It was not allowed
to be gay.
Yeah, you were sent to prison if you were caught, and if in the services you were thrown out until 2000. But people knew about it. So, for example, one of the people I found interviewed was a man called Ron Perks, who was a chauffeur in 1948 when he went to Malta as the commander of the 1st Cruiser Squadron. And Ron Perks told me, and he's again a reputable witness, that he was briefed to find out where the male brothel was in Malta because Mountbatten would want to be taken there.
Wow.
So, I mean, that was his commanding officer passing that on to Ron Perks. But in the Navy, everyone kept quiet. A lot of the affairs went on with junior officers in the Navy, of course, whose careers would have been in trouble if they'd said anything. But they were very discreet, and this was what I found with Guy Burgess. I mean, one of the reasons the Russians recruited him as a spy was that he was gay. He was part of a homosexual network which had to operate undercover, and therefore he made a good spy. He could be in some ways blackmailed by them or exposed, but at the same time, there was an extraordinary bond between this gay community because of the risks that they ran, and they had to trust people. And had to be careful.
Yeah, we interviewed the conspiracy researcher David Icke, and he said there are people in high places on purpose because of their blackmail ability, because they've got such deviant tendencies. So do you agree with that then?
Well, I think now no one cares who people's sexuality is, so there isn't the scope for blackmail. And I'm
not on about the sexuality. I'm on about sexual and pedophilia,
Well, I think I'm always amazed when they arrest MPs, schoolmasters, all sorts of people, policemen, that you would appear very law-abiding and not the sort of people who'd be involved in this, and then they find that there's this double life. And I suppose the theme of all my books is these people with double lives, the
Yeah.
spies, the even John Buck and I, the book was called The Presbyterian Cavalier. And though, I mean, he was very upright Scots Presbyterian,
Yeah.
there was a cavalier aspect to him. He was a romantic and a much more less severe figure than people thought. So I think that's what I'm interested in, people who have hidden lives. And I think we all, in some ways, have a series of lives, and we keep some quieter, shall we say, than others.
Yeah. Well, I certainly did with the and the rave scene in Arizona until the SWAT team came. So we've got a documentary coming out about Jimmy Savile. It's like 4 hours long. And there was like a peak of him offending. Was there a peak of Dickie engaging in that spread out throughout his years?
Well, it's very difficult to get the evidence. There's one man I quote called Norman Neild, who was his chauffeur during the Second World War, and says that he, but he's dead now, so it's very difficult to get the proof. But he says that he would take him, drive children to him in Hampshire, and who were. So this was happening during the war, and then of course the evidence I've got is from 1977. So suggests that it went on throughout the period. But those are the only two examples I've got. But the FBI report is from the 1944. So I think certainly from the war onwards, and I think one of the rumors about the lack of security when he died was that he didn't want security. He didn't want the constrictions of bodyguards following him, because of course it slightly affected what he could do.
That makes complete sense. Now with Savile, we've interviewed so many different guests as to how he got away with it for so long. I imagine it's the same factors, the connections, the power, the prestige with Dickie that enabled him not to be held to account for. Well,
I think clearly people did know, and they turned a blind eye for whatever reason. I think he may have been lucky. He was discreet. These things are not. People say, well, why didn't people find out about it? Well, by its very nature, these are very private things, and it's not something you broadcast. So, but yeah, there must have been people. There must have been security people who knew what was going on. For example, the people the boys clearly knew what was going on. I mean, the extraordinary thing is that no one really broke rank and said anything, and it was all sort of hushed up. I mean, there's a story that Nigel West, the spy writer, tells of him when he was working in television, that there was an obituary program being made on Mountbatten, and he admitted to his on the program, and the program basically was shut down. It never appeared. And I looked for the transcription. Normally there's a transcript of these programs. There's nothing in the archives. It's just been completely killed. So I think possibly he was much more open. I mean, again, when I went and talked to people, everyone in the gay community of that era knew about it. And in fact, I interviewed a man who's still alive, man now in his 70s, who was then in his 20s, who had a long affair with Mountbatten. So and it was sort of known in the gay scene.
So with the royal family being so media savvy, do you think the Queen would have had a word with him about this?
Who knows? Who knows what goes on? I mean, clearly anything to avoid any bad publicity. I'm sure there was a word, but he was a man who sort of did his own thing. And I think probably people cleared up behind him and just kept things quiet. He was very good at curating his own reputation. I mean, he did that after India. He had tame biographers write books about it. He suppressed or tried to suppress and make life difficult for people who were critical of him. There were not just official biographies of him and Edwina, but shall we say, books that they cooperated with without it appearing that they cooperated. And they made the fact that they control access to a lot of the Mountbatten archives, so a lot of them are still private, means that only people that they can trust are allowed access. Anyone who may be independent scholar, who may just actually put down the truth, is kept away.
So, what was his relationship like with the Queen?
Well, I mean, some people say it was very avuncular. I mean, he was over 20 years older than her, but she'd known him as a child throughout her life. I think she trusted him. I mean, had very senior posts. I mean, before she became queen, I mean, he'd been viceroy of India. He'd commanded troops in war. He'd was someone who knew about statecraft. So I think she would have listened to him, but she I think began as she got more confident and had more advisors. I suspect listened, but didn't always follow his advice. Um, but I think he had the best intentions. Well, he push himself first forward, but then help the royal family. But who knows? I mean, there's stories of him elbowing out the little children on the balcony so he could be at the front. So he was quite a pushy character.
Yeah, it comes across like that in The Crown as a bit of a swashbuckler.
Yeah, I think that's probably very fair. I think Charles Dance was very, looked absolutely the part.
Yeah.
He was an operator. Someone said to him, a general called Templar said that if he swallowed a nail, it would come out. He was so crooked, it would come out like a corkscrew.
So he was 20 years older than the Queen, and he's this authority figure. He's had all these achievements. It would be hard for her to tell someone off like that, wouldn't it?
Well, it is difficult. Exactly. He did his own thing,
Yeah.
and I think it was quite difficult to control him. His own generation were the Duke of Windsor and King George VI, but King George VI, of course, died in 52. The Queen Mother never really liked him. She thought he was a bit of a spiv. So yeah, there wasn't anyone who was going to control him. And there is a famous episode in 1968 when the so-called 1968 coup, when the Harold Wilson was very unpopular. There was industrial unrest, economic problems, and various people came together and went to Mountbatten and said, "We need this national figure. We need a national government of all the parties, and people from outside government. I mean, people perhaps from the army." And will you lead us? So, I mean, in some ways, treachery. And the line was that these people came to him and he said, "Get lost. This is rank treachery." But actually, I discovered that he listened to them and had several meetings. He was quite intrigued, and he put up his own candidates to have been this. So, I mean, he was a man who certainly had a great regard for his own abilities.
What was his relationship like with Prince Charles?
Well, Prince Charles, this was the grandfather he never had, and Philip didn't really have the time or perhaps the temperament to really understand a much more sensitive son. Mountbatten only had daughters. This was the son he never had. He had time. He retired in 1965 from the Navy. So just the sort of time when Charles was forging his career. He was the one who encouraged him to go into the Navy, who helped plot the route through Cambridge, for example. Charles used to go and stay with him at Broadlands when he was based down at Portsmouth. And he was someone who had time and would listen to him. And the stories are told that where Prince Philip would give Charles a rather useful educational toy, Mountbatten would give him something rather fun. And when Charles graduated from Dartmouth and there was no member of his family to see him graduate, Mountbatten made the point of going representing the family.
Oh, wow.
So he was a very important figure. I mean, Charles was absolutely devastated when he died. And one of the arguments is if Mountbatten had lived, he probably would have advised him against Princess Diana.
Really?
But who knows? The advice that Mountbatten tended to give, and the one he followed was basically, have as many affairs as you want, but just find someone sensible to marry. And that's sort of, in some ways, what Charles was doing.
And was an understanding that Charles could have affairs with people from a certain class. Was that how it was done?
Well, I think, inevitably, those are the people they meet, those are the people they trust. And so that's going to be inevitable. The book I'm doing on King Edward VIII, he had numerous affairs with people from all over. I mean, not necessarily from his background, because he went on these world tours and he would meet people at events, often from quite a modest background and often have illegitimate children with them. So I think it depends on the character. Edward VIII, wasn't too discriminating. Others perhaps might be more.
So what about Camilla then? Did Dickie play a role in that at all?
Um, I don't know what the role was there. I mean, what we know is that Charles didn't get his act together with Camilla, and didn't propose, and then she got tired and went and married Andrew Parker Bowles. I mean, the problem was Charles was posted away with the Navy so often, and of course, the moment when she got engaged, he was away. But I'm sure that that Dickie would have been a confidant and would have given him support after he discovered that she'd married.
So you're saying if he wasn't away, he could have just been with Camilla and lived happily ever after, possibly?
I think he was a bit indecisive, and I mean, of course, there was still this rather old-fashioned view that you couldn't have a woman with a so-called past; they had to be these virgins, and that's how he ended up with Diana. I mean, that wouldn't happen now, but I think still in the 1980s there was still this sense that you couldn't just marry a girl who lived with people before or had boyfriends.
And how did they know if the woman was a virgin?
Well, I think they just took soundings, and you discovered if they'd been around. I don't know. Maybe they did tests. Who knows?